In the quiet corridors of Chicago's United Center, long after the roaring crowds had dissipated, a solitary figure moved methodically across the gleaming hardwood floor. Alan Maldonado wasn't just a janitor. He was the silent guardian of this hallowed basketball sanctuary. His mop glided across the court like a dancer's practice steps, erasing the evidence of that night's battle between the Bulls and the Pistons. Sweat, dirt, maybe even a drop of blood, all disappeared under Alan's careful attention. For 15 years, Alan had maintained these floors with a craftsman's pride. He knew every inch of this arena, every corner where dust collected, every spot that needed extra attention. While most saw him as just another maintenance worker, Alan saw himself as the keeper of dreams. On this court, legends were made, and he played his small part in that magic. What most people didn't know was that Alan had once harbored basketball dreams of his own. Back in high school, he'd been a promising point guard with quick hands and a natural feel for the game. But life had other plans. An injury, followed by family responsibilities, had diverted his path. Now, in his mid-50s, those dreams had long since been replaced by the practical needs of making a living and supporting his family. Tonight was no different from any other, or so he thought. As Alan finished his rounds, checking that the equipment was properly stored and the doors secured, he heard the distinct sound of a basketball bouncing. He frowned. The arena should be empty at this hour. Had some kids somehow sneaked in? It wouldn't be the first time some basketball-crazed fans had tried to play on the same court as their heroes. Following the echoing sound, Alan rounded the corner to the practice court and stopped in his tracks. There, alone in the dimly lit gym, was Michael Jordan himself, practicing free throws with mechanical precision. Even from a distance, Alan could see the intense concentration on the superstar's face, that famous tongue slightly protruding in focus as he released the ball in a perfect arc. Alan stood frozen, unsure whether to announce his presence or quietly back away. This was MJ's private moment, something few ever witnessed, the solitary work that underpinned the public glory. Before he could decide, Jordan spotted him and paused, ball in hand. "Evening," Jordan said simply, his voice carrying across the empty court. "Mr. Jordan?" Alan nodded respectfully, clutching his mop like an anchor. "Sorry to interrupt. I didn't know anyone was still here. I can come back later." Jordan studied him for a moment, then shook his head. "You're not interrupting. Just getting some extra shots in. Couldn't sleep." Alan understood that feeling. The restlessness that comes when something isn't quite right with your game, when perfection feels just out of reach. He'd experienced it himself, decades ago. "Court's all yours, Mr. Jordan. I'm almost done anyway." As Alan turned to leave, Jordan called out, "How long you been working here?" The question surprised him. People like Jordan rarely noticed people like Alan. 15 years, sir." 15 years, Jordan repeated thoughtfully, bouncing the ball absently. "So you've seen it all, huh?" "Just about," Alan smiled. "The championships, the comebacks, been here through it all." Something in Alan's posture, or perhaps the way he watched the ball, must have given him away, because Jordan's next question cut right to the heart. "You play?" Such a simple question, but it opened a floodgate of memories. High school championships, the scholarship offer that never materialized after his knee injury, the pickup games he still occasionally joined at the community center near his home in Cicero. "Used to," Alan replied. "Long time ago." Jordan nodded, seeming to understand everything in those few words. Then he did something unexpected. He passed the ball to Alan. Reflexively, Alan caught it, his hands remembering the feel of the leather, the weight of possibility. For a moment he just held it, feeling awkward and out of place in his grey maintenance uniform. "Go ahead," Jordan said, gesturing to the basket. "Take a shot." Alan hesitated. then decided that when Michael Jordan tells you to take a shot, you take the shot. He dribbled once, set his feet, and released the ball in a smooth motion that surprised even himself. It swished through the net with a satisfying sound that took him back 20 years. Jordan nodded approvingly. Nice form. Those 2 words of praise from the greatest player ever to touch a basketball meant more to Allen than any paycheck he'd ever received. Lucky shot, Allen demurred, but couldn't help the smile that spread across his face. Nah, that wasn't luck. Jordan retrieved the ball and passed it back. That was muscle memory. You had game. Had. Past tense. The reality of his life now versus what might have been should have stung, but somehow, in that moment, it didn't. Instead, Allen felt seen in a way he rarely experienced in his day-to-day life. You closing up? Jordan asked. Yes, sir, but take your time. I'll lock up when you're done. Jordan considered this, then asked, Mind if I stay a while longer? I need to work on something. Of course, Mr. Jordan. Stay as long as you need. As Allen finished his cleaning, he couldn't help occasionally glancing over at Jordan, marveling at the dedication of a man who had already achieved more than most. Could dream of, yet still pushed himself harder than anyone else. Before leaving the practice court, Allen turned back. Mr. Jordan, the lights automatically dim at 1 a.m. Just so you know. Jordan nodded his thanks, already focused back on his shooting rhythm. That night became the first of many. Over the next few months, Allen would occasionally find Jordan at the arena late at night, working tirelessly on some aspect of his game. Sometimes they exchanged a few words, sometimes just a nod of acknowledgement. Allen always made sure the practice court was immaculate and always left Jordan to his solitary pursuit of excellence. One night, as a particularly brutal Chicago winter howled outside, Allen found Jordan sitting on the bench staring at the floor instead of practicing. Everything all right, Mr. Jordan? Jordan looked up, seeming almost surprised to see him. Just thinking. After a pause, he added, You ever feel like no matter how hard you work, it's never enough? The question was so unexpected coming from someone who seemed to have everything that Allen took a moment to answer. Every day, he finally said with complete honesty, but then I remind myself that my work matters, even if most people don't see it. Jordan studied him with those intensely competitive eyes that had stared down the greatest players in the world. Your name's Allen, right? Yes, sir. You mind if I call you Al? Not at all. Well, Al, I think more people notice your work than you realize. Jordan stood up and grabbed his ball. You want to shoot around a bit? My jumper's off tonight. For the next hour, Allen Maldonado lived a dream he'd never even dared to imagine, shooting baskets with Michael Jordan, who offered small tips on his elbow position and follow-through as if Allen were a teammate rather than the man who mopped the floors. When they finally called it a night, Jordan said, Thanks, Al, I needed that. Anytime, Mr. Jordan. Mike, Jordan corrected him. After midnight, it's just Mike. That night marked a shift in their unusual friendship. Twice a week, sometimes more, Jordan would appear for his late-night sessions, and increasingly, he'd invite Allen to join him for a few minutes. They rarely spoke about anything personal, mostly basketball, sometimes the challenges of perfection, the constant drive to improve even when everyone tells you you're already the best. For Allen, these midnight sessions became precious memories. He collected like treasures, never sharing them with anyone, not even his wife, Alejandra. Some experiences were too sacred to risk diminishing them by trying to put them into words. As the months passed and the Bulls marched toward another championship, Allen noticed Jordan spending more late nights at the arena. The pressure of carrying a team, a city, and a global brand on his shoulders seemed to weigh on him, though he never complained. Allen made sure to give him space when he needed it, while always ensuring the facilities were perfect. One particularly late night, as Jordan was leaving, he paused by the door where Allen was changing a light bulb. Al, I've been meaning to ask you something. Yes, Mike. Why'd you stop playing? You clearly love the game. The question caught Alan off guard. They'd never really delved into personal histories before. Tore my ACL senior year of high school, he said, climbing down from the ladder. Lost my scholarship chance. Then my dad got sick and someone needed to help support the family. He shrugged. Life happens. Jordan nodded thoughtfully. You ever regret it? The path not taken? Alan considered the question carefully. Sometimes, he admitted, but I've got a good family, steady work. My son's in college now. First in our family. Hard to regret that. Your son play ball. Football, Alan smiled. Breaking family tradition. Jordan laughed at that. Kids always find their own way. He seemed about to say something else, then checked his watch. It's late, I should let you get home. Daniel, my son, he's a huge fan, Alan said impulsively. Has all your posters, shoes, everything. Jordan smiled. Bring him by sometime. I'll sign something for him. That would mean the world to him. Thank you. As winter gave way to spring and the Bulls clinched another division title, Alan noticed Jordan seemed more at ease during their late-night encounters. One evening, as they were both preparing to leave, Jordan asked, You coming to the game tomorrow? Alan shook his head. Just working the night shift after. Without hesitation, Jordan reached into his gym bag and pulled out an envelope. Section 1-12, row 4, bring your family. Before Alan could protest, Jordan added, Consider it thanks for all the late nights. The next evening, Alan sat with his wife Alejandra and their son Daniel in seats better than he could have ever afforded, watching in awe as Jordan put on a clinic against the Knicks, scoring 47 points with a level of artistry that left the crowd breathless. Dad, how did you get these seats? Daniel kept asking, his eyes wide with disbelief. Let's just say I know someone who knows someone, Alan replied, not ready to share his secret friendship with the greatest basketball player on the planet. After that night, their late sessions continued, but with a new layer of ease between them. Jordan would ask about Daniel's football games, and Alan would occasionally share stories of the arena from before Jordan's time. Two men from entirely different worlds, connected by respect and a love for the game of basketball. Then came the night everything changed. Alan had been feeling unwell for weeks, unusual fatigue, a persistent cough, occasional chest pains he attributed to heartburn. He'd ignored the symptoms, pushing through his shifts with over-the-counter medications and sheer willpower. A man like him couldn't afford to miss work, and his family relied on his income. It was a quiet Tuesday night when Jordan found Alan collapsed on the practice court, his mop still clutched in his hand, his breathing labored, and his skin ashen. Al. Jordan was at his side in an instant. What's wrong? Talk to me. Just need a minute, Alan gasped, trying to sit up and failing. Probably just overworked. But Jordan had seen enough sports injuries to recognize when something was seriously wrong. Without hesitation, he pulled out his cell phone and called for an ambulance, staying by Alan's side, keeping him talking to prevent him from losing consciousness. Help's coming, Al. Just hang in there, Jordan said, his voice steady despite the concern in his eyes. Think about Alejandra and Daniel. They need you to fight. The last thing Alan remembered before the paramedics arrived was the surreal sight of Michael Jordan, the icon whose poster hung in millions of bedrooms around the world, holding his hand and promising everything would be okay. In the ambulance, as consciousness faded in and out, Alan had a moment of clarity. Here he was, a simple janitor who had spent his life in the background, now being rushed to the hospital with the most famous athlete in the world riding alongside him, refusing to leave until he knew Alan would be all right. Life had a strange way of writing stories, he thought, as darkness finally claimed him. His last conscious thought was wondering if this was the end of his story, or perhaps somehow just another unexpected beginning. As the ambulance raced through the streets of Chicago, sirens wailing into the night, Alan drifted in and out of consciousness. The paramedics worked with practiced efficiency, attaching monitors, checking vital signs, and administering medication. Through the haze of pain and confusion, he was vaguely aware of a commanding presence beside him, someone whose voice seemed to part the chaos like Moses parting the Red Sea. "I need your best people on this," the voice insisted. "This man is important. Important." The word floated through Alan's clouded mind like a foreign concept. He had never been important, not in the way that mattered to the world. He was the invisible man who cleaned up after the important people had gone home. Yet here was Michael Jordan, treating his life as if it carried the weight of a championship game. The next 72 hours passed in fragmented moments of clarity amid long stretches of medical intervention. A heart attack, they told him when he finally regained full consciousness. A major one. If Jordan hadn't found him when he did, if the ambulance hadn't arrived so quickly, if the hospital hadn't been prepared for his arrival, any one of these factors could have resulted in a different outcome. "You're one lucky man, Mr. Maldonado," Dr. Veronica Rich told him on the third morning, checking his charts with efficient movements. "Most people who experience an attack of this severity outside of a hospital setting don't make it to tell the tale." Alan nodded weakly, still processing the reality of his situation. "When can I go back to work?" he asked, his mind immediately turning to practical concerns. Bills, mortgage payments, his son's tuition. Dr. Rich raised an eyebrow. "Work is the least of your concerns right now. You're looking at several months of recovery and rehabilitation before you can return to any form of physical labor." Several months. The words hit Alan like a physical blow. Their savings wouldn't last that long. They'd fall behind on payments. Daniel might need to put college on hold. "I need to call my wife," he said, trying to sit up and immediately regretting it as pain shot through his chest. "Mrs. Maldonado has been here every day," Dr. Rich assured him. "She just went to get some breakfast. She'll be back soon." The doctor hesitated, then added with an unusual note of awe in her voice, "You've had quite a few visitors, actually, including one who's caused quite a stir among the hospital staff." Before Alan could ask who she meant, the door to his private room opened. Alejandra rushed in, her face lighting up at the sight of him, awake and alert. "Alan!" She was at his side in an instant, carefully embracing him, her tears dampening the shoulder of his hospital gown. "You scared me to death." "I'm sorry," he whispered, holding her as tightly as his weakened state would allow. "I should have listened when you told me to see the doctor." "Yes, you should have," she agreed, pulling back to look at him sternly through her tears. "But that's an argument for when you're stronger." Alan looked past her to the surprisingly spacious private room with its large window overlooking the city. This was the kind of accommodation reserved for wealthy patients with premium insurance, not for janitors with basic coverage. "Alejandra," he said quietly, "how are we affording this room?" His wife's expression shifted to something between amazement and disbelief. "You really don't know, do you?" "Know what?" "Michael Jordan," she said, her voice dropping to a reverent whisper. "He's been handling everything, the ambulance, the specialists, this room, all of it." Alan blinked, certain he had misheard. "That can't be right." "He was here all night that first day," she continued. "He only left when they assured him you were stable. He spoke to the doctors, made phone calls. I've never seen anything like it, Alan. The way people responded to him, it was like watching a miracle unfold." Before Alan could process this information, there was a gentle knock at the door. Alejandra turned, her eyes widening slightly. That must be him now. He said he'd stop by this morning, and there he was, Michael Jordan himself, dressed in a simple polo shirt and slacks rather than his Bulls uniform, carrying a small gift bag and wearing an expression of genuine concern. "How's our patient doing today?" he asked, his voice deliberately light despite the seriousness in his eyes. "Mike," Alan managed, the familiar name feeling strange in this new context. "You didn't need to do all this." Jordan pulled up a chair beside the bed, setting the gift bag on the side table. "Actually, I did," he said, with quiet authority. "And before you start worrying about it, don't. This isn't charity, Al. This is what friends do for each other." Friends. The word hung in the air between them, a recognition of the unusual bond that had formed during those late nights in an empty arena. "The doctors say you're going to make a full recovery," Jordan continued, "but it's going to take time. And during that time, I want you focusing on getting better, not worrying about bills or your job." Alan started to protest, but Jordan held upper hand, stopping him with the same authority he commanded on the court. "The Bulls organization values loyalty, Al. You've given 15 years of your life making sure that arena is perfect for us night after night. Now it's our turn to make sure you have what you need." Alejandra, sensing the need for the two men to talk, quietly excused herself to call Daniel with the good news of his father's improvement. When she had gone, Jordan leaned forward, his expression serious. "You scared the hell out of me, Al." "Sorry about that," Alan replied, attempting a weak smile. "The doctors said you've probably been having warning signs for weeks. Why didn't you say something during all those late nights?" Alan shrugged slightly. "It didn't seem important, just and part of getting older, I thought." "Not important," Jordan repeated, shaking his head in disbelief. "The man who's kept the lights on for my midnight practices, who's listened to me complain about my jump shot at 2 in the morning, who's never once asked for anything in return, and he doesn't think his health is important." Put that way, it did sound foolish, but Alan had spent his life being practical rather than important, taking care of others rather than himself. "I have something for you," Jordan said, reaching for the gift bag. "Something I was going to give you anyway, but now it seems even more appropriate." From the bag, he pulled a brand new basketball, its leather surface still pristine and unmarked. But this wasn't just any ball. It was emblazoned with the Bulls logo and signatures from the entire championship team. "The guys all signed it when I told them about you," Jordan explained. "They wanted you to know that what you do matters to all of us." Alan ran his fingers over the signatures, speechless at the gesture. These were names he had cleaned up after for years, legends of the game whose sweat he had mopped from the court night after night. "There's something else," Jordan added, reaching back into the bag. He pulled out an envelope and placed it on Alan's lap. "The team doctors want you to see a cardiac specialist, the best in Chicago. This is an appointment for next week, after you're discharged. A car will pick you up." "Mike, I can't accept." "You can, and you will," Jordan interrupted. "Firmly, not just for yourself, but for Alejandra and Daniel. They need you around for a long time, Al." The mention of his family silenced Alan's protests. He would do for them what he might not do for himself. "Thank you," he said simply, knowing the words were inadequate, but having nothing better to offer. Jordan nodded, understanding in his eyes. "How's Daniel doing with his football?" The change of subject was a kindness, giving Alan a chance to regain his composure. For the next hour, they talked about safer topics: Daniel's athletic prospects, the Bulls' championship chances, the upcoming games. It was almost like their late-night conversations at the arena, except for the hospital bed between them. When Jordan finally stood to leave, promising to return the following day, Alan was struck by the strangeness of it all. He had spent 15 years watching Michael Jordan from a distance, admiring his skill, his determination, his refusal to accept anything less than excellence. Never once had he imagined that this legend would sit at his bedside, concerned for his recovery, treating him as an equal. As the days passed, news of Jordan's regular visits spread throughout the hospital. Alan found himself the subject of curious glances from nurses, doctors, and other patients. Some even found excuses to pass by his room around the time Jordan usually visited, hoping for a glimpse of the basketball star. "You're becoming quite the celebrity," Alejandra teased one afternoon, after shooing away yet another lost hospital volunteer who had somehow ended up at their door. "Not me," Alan corrected her. "I'm just the guy who happened to have a heart attack at the right place, in time," but they both knew it was more than that. Something about Alan had earned not just Jordan's respect but his loyalty, a quality the basketball star was known to value above almost everything else. A week after his admission, as Alan was preparing for discharge, Jordan arrived with Bulls. "General Manager Jerry Krause." "Al," Jordan said, "I want you to meet someone important." Krause stepped forward, extending his hand carefully to avoid disturbing any of the medical equipment. "Mr. Maldonado, it's an honor to finally meet you. Michael has told me a lot about you." Alan shook his hand, bemused by the formality. "Likewise, sir. I understand you'll be off work for some time," Krause continued. "I wanted to personally assure you that your position will be waiting for you whenever you're ready to return. And in the meantime, the Bulls organization will be covering your salary and medical expenses." Alan looked from Krause to Jordan, stunned by the announcement. "I don't know what to say." "Say you'll focus on getting better," Jordan suggested with a smile, "and that when you do come back, you'll still let me practice after hours." "You got it," Alan promised, his voice thick with emotion. As spring blossomed into summer, Alan's recovery progressed steadily. The cardiac rehabilitation program that Jordan had arranged was rigorous but effective, gradually rebuilding his strength and stamina. 3 days a week, a car would arrive at his modest home in Cicero to transport him to the state-of-the-art medical facility where specialists monitored his progress with meticulous care. At home, Alejandra had transformed into both nurse and drill sergeant, ensuring he took his medications exactly as prescribed, followed his diet plan without deviation, and rested adequately between therapy sessions. Her fierce devotion reminded Alan why he had fallen in love with her 30 years. Earlier, she fought for what mattered to her, and somehow, he had always been at the top of that list. "You need to drink more water," she would insist, placing another glass on the table beside his chair. "The doctor said hydration is important for your heart." "Yes, dear," he would reply with mock resignation, though they both knew he welcomed her care. The enforced idleness was the most difficult adjustment. After decades of physical labor, Alan found himself restless in recovery. To combat this, Daniel had set up a small television in the living room where Alan could watch the Bulls' playoff games. It wasn't the same as being there, feeling the energy of the crowd and the squeak of sneakers on the freshly mopped court, but it gave him something to focus on beyond his own health concerns. What Alan didn't expect was the stream of visitors from the Bulls organization. It began with Ryan Jenkins, the head of facility maintenance, who stopped by with a card signed by the entire janitorial staff. Then came Chelsea Johnson from HR, assuring him that his benefits were secure and offering assistance with any paperwork. Even head coach Brett Perry made an appearance, bringing a Bulls jacket and sharing stories of his own father's recovery from heart surgery years earlier. Each visitor made a point of mentioning that they were there at Jordan's suggestion, creating a tapestry of support that wrapped around Alan and his family during his recovery. The gesture was so typical of Jordan. Not content merely to provide financial assistance, he had mobilized an entire organization to ensure Alan never felt forgotten. "Why is he doing all this?" Daniel asked one evening as they watched Jordan score 38 points against the Pacers in Game 5 of the Eastern Conference Finals. "I mean, don't get me wrong, it's amazing, but you're just a janitor," Alan finished for him without rancor. Daniel looked embarrassed. "I didn't mean it like that, Dad." "I know," Alan assured him. "And honestly, I've asked myself the same question." He watched as Jordan executed a perfect fade-away jumper on screen. "I think, for Mike, it's about respect." He respects the work, no matter who does it or what that work is. It was more than that, though Alan kept these thoughts to himself. In those late-night sessions, he had glimpsed something in Jordan that few ever saw, the weight of being not just a man, but a global icon. The loneliness that came with being elevated so far above others that genuine connection became nearly impossible. Perhaps in Alan, Jordan had found something increasingly rare in his life, authenticity without expectation. 2 months into his recovery, on a particularly beautiful June morning, Alan received an unexpected call. "Al, it's Mike. How are you feeling?" "Better every day," Alan replied truthfully. "The doctors say I'm making good progress." "Good enough for a short outing? I've got something to show you." Before Alan could respond, Jordan continued, "I've already cleared it with your doctors and Alejandra. Car will be there in 30 minutes. True to his word, a sleek black SUV with tinted windows arrived exactly half an hour later. The driver, introducing himself simply as Frank, helped Alan into the back seat with professional courtesy. "Where are we going?" Alan asked as they pulled away from his home. "United Center, sir," Frank replied. "Mr. Jordan's instructions." The arena looked different in daylight, without the crowds and excitement of game night. As Frank escorted him through a side entrance, Alan felt a strange mixture of familiarity and disorientation. This was his workplace, yet he was entering as a guest rather than an employee. Jordan was waiting for them on the main court, dressed in practice gear as if preparing for a workout. He greeted Alan with a warm handshake that turned into a careful hug. "You're looking good, Al. Got some color back in your face." "Feeling better," Alan confirmed, "though I'm not sure I should be here. Doctor said no work for at least another month." "This isn't work," Jordan assured him with a mysterious smile. "Consider it a social visit." He guided Alan toward the court, where something was happening that momentarily confused Alan's senses. The entire Bulls championship team was there, spread out across the hardwood, but they weren't practicing. Instead, they were doing something Alan had done countless times over 15 years. They were cleaning the court. Scottie Pippen was pushing a dust mop along the sidelines. Dennis Rodman was wiping down the backboards. Steve Kerr was carefully polishing the Bulls logo at center court. Each player was engaged in some aspect of arena maintenance, working with varying degrees of skill, but undeniable enthusiasm. "What is this?" Alan asked, genuinely puzzled. "This," Jordan said with satisfaction, "is the team showing their appreciation for the guy who's kept this place running smoothly for 15 years. As if on cue, the players noticed their arrival and gathered around, greeting Alan with the respect typically reserved for coaching staff or team owners. "Mr. Maldonado," Pippen said, extending his hand. "Good to finally meet you properly. MJ tells us you've got the best jump shot on the maintenance staff." "And the best work ethic in the building," added Kerr. Alan was speechless, looking from one legendary player to another. These were men whose posters covered his son's walls, whose jerseys were displayed in the Basketball Hall of Fame, whose names would live forever in sports history. And they were treating him, Alan Maldonado, as someone worthy of their respect. "We've got something for you," Jordan said, nodding to Rodman, who disappeared briefly into the tunnel and returned with what appeared to be a framed jersey. But it wasn't a traditional Bulls jersey with a player's name. Instead, it was a custom-made maintenance uniform, complete with the Bulls logo, bearing the name Maldonado and the number 15 for his years of service. It had been signed by every member of the championship team and framed with professional care. "We hang the jerseys of people who make a difference to this organization," Jordan explained, "and you've made a difference, Al." The gesture was so unexpected, so far beyond anything Alan could have imagined, that he found himself fighting back tears. In that moment, he wasn't thinking about his heart attack or his medical bills or the uncertainty of his future. He was Simply a man being recognized for doing his job with pride and dedication. I don't know what to say, he admitted, his voice rough with emotion. You don't need to say anything, Jordan assured him. But there is something you need to do. He handed Alan a basketball, not the signed one from the hospital, but a regular practice ball, scuffed from use. Doctor says you need to start rebuilding your strength, Jordan explained with a grin. And I figured there's no better physical therapy than shooting hoops with the Chicago Bulls. For the next hour, Alan experienced what thousands of basketball fans would have given anything to enjoy. A casual shoot-around with the greatest team in NBA history. The players were careful with him, mindful of his recovery, but treated him as one of their own, offering good-natured ribbing when he missed and genuine applause when he made a shot. As they played, Jordan explained that the team had been implementing a new tradition during Alan's absence. Before each home game, the last player to leave the locker room would touch the maintenance closet door for good luck. A small gesture of respect for the behind-the-scenes work that made their success possible. The winning streak started right after we began doing it, Kerr noted. 16 straight home wins. That's not superstition, Jordan corrected firmly. That's appreciation coming full circle. When it was time to leave, the team gathered around. Alan once more. Jordan spoke for the group. The playoffs are almost over, Al. One more series and we'll have another championship. We want you there when it happens. I'll be watching on TV, Alan promised. No, Jordan shook his head. We want you there, courtside. The whole organization does. The invitation wasn't just to attend a game, it was to be present for a historic moment, to witness from the best seats in the house as this legendary team cemented their dynasty with another championship victory. As the black SUV drove him home, Alan gazed out at the Chicago skyline, reflecting on the strange journey that had brought him to this point. A heart attack, the thing he had feared would destroy his family's security, had somehow opened a door to experiences he never could have imagined. When he arrived home, Daniel was waiting on the porch, practically vibrating with excitement. Dad, Scottie Pippen called the house. He said you were shooting baskets with the team. Alan smiled, realizing that Jordan had arranged that call, knowing exactly what it would mean to a young man who had grown up idolizing these players. I was, he confirmed, allowing Daniel to help him up the porch steps. And they're not bad for a bunch of guys who don't know how to properly wax a court. Inside, Alejandra was preparing dinner, the small kitchen filled with the comforting aroma of her famous enchiladas. She looked up as they entered, immediately assessing his condition with her nurse's eye. You're tired, but you're happy, she observed with satisfaction, so I won't scold you for overexerting yourself this time. Alan crossed to her and placed a gentle kiss on her cheek. It was worth it, he assured her. Every minute. That night, as they ate dinner as a family, Alan shared stories of his afternoon with the Bulls. Daniel hung on every word, asking detailed questions about each player, while Alejandra watched her husband with knowing eyes, seeing beyond the celebrity encounter to the deeper truth. Alan was healing, not just physically but in spirit. Later, as they prepared for bed, Alejandra finally asked the question that had been on her mind all evening. This friendship with Jordan, it means a lot to you, doesn't it? Alan considered this as he carefully took his evening medications. It's not the friendship I expected at this point in my life, he admitted, but yes, it matters. Not because he's Michael Jordan, but because he sees you, Alejandra finished for him, understanding perfectly. The real you. Alan nodded, grateful as always for her insight. And strangely enough, I think I see the real him too, beyond the fame and the glory. Alejandra smiled, turning down the covers on their bed. That's a rare gift, mi amor, for both of you. As he drifted towards sleep that night, Alan reflected on the curious turn his life had taken. For 15 years, he had worked in the shadows of greatness, content to play his small part in the background of others' success. Never had he imagined that a chance encounter, a moment of genuine connection, would lead to a friendship that transcended the vast differences in their lives. His last thought before sleep claimed him was not of basketball or fame or even his health concerns. It was the simple realization that sometimes the most meaningful relationships emerge from the most unlikely circumstances, when one person truly sees another, not for their status or achievements, but for who they are at their core. The United Center hummed with an energy that seemed to vibrate through the very foundation of the building. Game 6 of the NBA Finals, Bulls versus the Seattle Supersonics, with Chicago leading the series 3-2. One more victory would secure another championship for the dynasty that had come to define basketball excellence in the 1990s. Allen sat courtside, exactly as Jordan had promised, with Alejandra and Daniel beside him. The seats placed them so close to the action that they could hear the players' calls to each other, feel the rush of air as they sprinted past, and see the determination etched on their faces. For Daniel, it was a dream realized, watching his heroes from a vantage point usually reserved for celebrities and millionaires. For Alejandra, it was an opportunity to witness firsthand the world that had been such a significant part of her husband's life for 15 years. For Allen himself, the experience was surreal. He had been in this arena countless times, had watched hundreds of games, but always from a distance, either while working or from the affordable seats high in the upper levels on the rare occasions he brought his family. Being courtside felt like stepping into a different reality, one where the invisible barriers between those who performed and those who served had somehow dissolved. As the teams went through their warm-ups, Jordan broke away from the Bulls' routine and approached the Maldonado family. "Glad you could make it, Al," he said, his game face softening momentarily. "How's the heart?" "Beating a little fast right now," Allen admitted with a smile. "But the doctors say that's normal for a Bulls fan in the finals." Jordan laughed, then turned to Daniel, who was staring at him with undisguised awe. "Your dad's got a pretty good jump shot, you know. Must run in the family." Daniel, normally talkative to a fault, could only nod mutely. Jordan seemed to understand the young man's speechlessness and extended his hand. "Michael Jordan. Nice to meet you officially, Daniel." Finding his voice at last, Daniel shook the offered hand. "Thank you for helping my dad, Mr. Jordan. It means a lot to our family." Something flickered across Jordan's face. Surprise, perhaps, at the sincerity in the young man's words, or appreciation for his directness. "Your dad helped me first," he replied simply. "I'm just returning the favor." With a nod to Alejandra and a final word of encouragement to Allen, Jordan rejoined his team, immediately shifting back into the intense focus that had become his trademark. "Oh my God," Daniel whispered, once Jordan was out of earshot. "Michael, Jordan knows my name." Alejandra squeezed her son's shoulder. "That's because your father made an impression on him, mijo. A good one. The game itself was basketball at its finest, a contest of wills between elite athletes operating at the peak of their abilities. The Supersonics, facing elimination, played with desperate intensity, while the Bulls responded with the calculated precision that had made them champions. Throughout the game, Allen found his attention divided. As a lifelong basketball fan, he was captivated by the athletic display unfolding before him. Yet he also found himself watching with the eyes of someone who had spent years maintaining this arena, noticing when players slipped slightly on a patch of floor that might need attention, observing how the game flowed across the court he had so carefully tended. During a timeout in the third quarter, with the Bulls leading by 7, Allen felt a tap on his shoulder. He turned to find Jerry Krause standing in the aisle. "Mr. Maldonado, could I speak with you for a moment?" Excusing himself to Alejandra and Daniel, Alan followed the Bulls' general manager to a quieter spot beneath the stands. "How are you enjoying the game?" Krause asked, though Alan sensed this wasn't the real purpose of their conversation. "It's incredible," Alan replied honestly. "An experience my family will never forget." Krause nodded, seeming pleased. "I've been thinking about your situation, Mr. Maldonado, about your return to work when the doctors clear you." Alan tensed slightly. Despite all the assurances, a part of him had been worried about his long-term employment prospects. Heart attacks change things, especially for men whose jobs required physical stamina. "I understand I might need to adjust my responsibilities," Alan began cautiously. "Actually," Krause interrupted, "I was thinking of a promotion." "A promotion?" "We're creating a new position, Director of Arena Operations, overseeing all aspects of facility maintenance, coordinating with event management, implementing new procedures for efficiency and quality control." Krause paused. "It would mean less physical labor, more administrative work, better pay too." Alan stared at him, processing the unexpected proposal. "Why me?" "Because you know this building better than anyone, because you've demonstrated exceptional dedication for 15 years, and," Krause added with unusual frankness, "because Michael Jordan thinks you're the right person for the job." There it was, the influence of the superstar extending beyond the court, shaping decisions that would affect Alan's life in profound ways. Yet rather than feeling uncomfortable with this intervention, Alan felt a surge of gratitude. Jordan had recognized something in him worth advocating for, had seen potential where others might have seen only a janitor with health problems. "I'd be honored," Alan said, extending his hand. "Thank you for the opportunity, Mr. Krause." "We'll discuss the details when you're fully recovered," Krause promised, shaking his hand firmly. "For now, enjoy the game with your family. Hopefully you'll be witnessing another championship tonight." When Alan returned to his seat, the expression on his face must have revealed something of what had transpired, because Alejandra immediately took his hand. "What happened?" she asked, concern evident in her voice. "Is your heart okay?" "My heart is fine," he assured her, squeezing her hand. "Better than fine, actually. I'll tell you everything after the game." As the fourth quarter unfolded, the Bulls steadily increased their lead. With 3 minutes remaining and victory all but assured, the crowd rose to their feet, the noise in the arena reaching deafening levels. Jordan, after scoring his 40th point of the night, glanced toward Alan during a break in play and gave a subtle nod, an acknowledgement between friends amid the chaos of impending celebration. When the final buzzer sounded and confetti began raining from the ceiling, Alan watched as the players embraced in triumph, their faces reflecting the pure joy of accomplishment. Moments later, as Jordan accepted the finals MVP trophy, the arena's cameras focused on his face, broadcasting his image. On the massive screens overhead, "I want to dedicate this victory to someone special," Jordan said, his voice echoing throughout the United Center. "To Alan Maldonado." A spotlight suddenly found Alan in the crowd, causing nearby fans to turn and stare in confusion and curiosity. "Most of you don't know him," Jordan continued, "but for 15 years, he's been taking care of this court, making sure it's perfect for us night after night. A few months ago, he suffered a heart attack right here in this arena. Tonight, he's back where he belongs, and so is the championship trophy." The crowd, following Jordan's lead, erupted in applause. Thousands of people cheering for a man most had never noticed before this moment. Daniel was filming everything on his camcorder, his face split with a proud grin, while Alejandra wiped tears from her eyes. In that moment, as he acknowledged the unexpected acclaim with a humble wave, Alan felt the culmination of a journey he never could have anticipated. From the shadows of the arena to the spotlight, from a life-threatening crisis to a new beginning, all because one night, years ago, he had chosen to simply be kind to a superstar who needed a quiet place to practice. Later that night, amid the locker room celebration, Jordan found a moment to pull Allen aside. "You good?" he asked, champagne dripping from his championship cap. "Better than good," Allen replied. "Kraus told me about the new position." Jordan nodded, satisfaction evident in his expression. "You earned it, Al, long before I said anything." "Still," Allen said, feeling the need to express what had been building in his heart for months, "I don't know how to thank you for everything you've done." Jordan considered this for a moment, then responded with unexpected solemnity. "You know, people always see the games, the championships, the commercials. They think they know me based on all that. But you saw me at 2 in the morning, frustrated with my jump shot, doubting myself when no one was watching. You saw the work, not just the results." He paused, looking around at the celebration unfolding around them. "In this world I live in, that kind of authentic connection is rare. So if you want to thank me, just keep being the guy who treats me like a person, not an icon. That's worth more than you know." The simplicity of the request struck Allen deeply. For all his wealth and fame, what Jordan valued most was something that cost nothing to give: genuine human connection without the distortion of celebrity. "That I can do," Allen promised. As summer turned to fall, and Allen gradually resumed his duties at the United Center, now in his new capacity as Director of Arena Operations, the friendship between the janitor and the superstar continued to develop. Jordan still came for his late-night practice sessions whenever his schedule allowed, and Allen still made sure the court was ready for him, though now he coordinated a team rather than handling the mop himself. Sometimes they would shoot baskets together after Jordan's practice, maintaining their unusual ritual. Other times, they would simply talk about basketball, about family, about the challenges of excelling in their respective fields. Two men from vastly different worlds, connected by mutual respect and a chance encounter that had evolved into something neither could have predicted. On the one-year anniversary of Allen's heart attack, he arrived at work to find a small package waiting on his desk. Inside was a basketball keychain with a note in Jordan's distinctive handwriting. "Some people cross paths. Others change each other's lives. Thanks for being the second kind." MJ Allen clipped the keychain to his office keys, a small but meaningful reminder that sometimes the most profound connections emerge from the most unexpected circumstances, and that genuine kindness, whether from a global icon or an unsung hero, possesses a power that transcends all barriers. Later that evening, as Allen locked up the arena after a Bulls victory, he paused at center court, looking up at the championship. Banners hanging from the rafters. Each represented countless hours of practice, determination, and teamwork, values he had always applied to his own work, even when no one was watching. In that quiet moment, standing alone on the court where his life had changed so dramatically, Allen Maldonado felt something he had rarely experienced in his 15 years of maintaining this arena, a sense of belonging. Not just as someone who worked here, but as someone whose contribution mattered, someone who had been seen, and in the end, perhaps that was the greatest gift Jordan had given him. Not the medical care or the promotion or the courtside seats, but the simple acknowledgement that every person's work has dignity and value, regardless of whether it happens in the spotlight or behind the scenes. With that thought warming his heart, Allen switched off the lights and headed home, leaving the arena in darkness until tomorrow, when players and fans would once again fill it with life and purpose, and he would be there, as always, making sure everything was ready for the magic to begin.